Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. The EU will not introduce retaliatory measures against the US after President Donald Trump decided to pause import tariffs for the next 90 days. The decision has been met with a positive reaction from the continent's stock markets. More on that in a moment, but first, the latest headlines. Coalition of the Willing maps out next steps for Ukraine at NATO headquarters in Brussels. At least 150 Chinese nationals are fighting in Ukraine, says Volodymyr Zelensky. And Polish football legend leads FC Barcelona to Champions League victory. We want to give negotiations a chance, says European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, as Brussels decides to refrain from any retaliatory actions against US trade tariffs for the next 3 months. This comes after Donald Trump decided to pause higher import tariffs for 90 days, concentrating on the ongoing trade war with China. Sasha Farber has this report.
With a sigh of relief and a rally. That's how Europe reacted to Donald Trump's reprieve, pausing tariffs for 90 days. Ever since Trump's so-called Liberation Day on April 2nd, the world has been reeling from the surprise hit. Now, Donald Trump seemed to again surprise the world with a shock reprieve.
I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate.
Although the retaliatory tariffs which were threatened have been paused for 90 days, the basic 10% levy still remains in effect, as does the 25% tariff on all aluminum, steel, and cars entering the U.S. The reaction from Brussels was conciliatory.
We took note of the announcement by President Trump. We want to give negotiations a chance, while finalizing the adoption of the EU countermeasures that saw strong support from our member states. We will put them on hold for 90 days.
Markets responded positively to the new announcement across Europe. Germany's DAX jumped around 8%. The London FTSE also surged, and Warsaw's WIG made gains. Despite this, none of the major markets in Europe rebounded to the levels before Donald Trump's announcements and have lost around 5 to 10% compared to the beginning of April. Some experts sense that Trump may have had a change of heart.
And his advisors were scared with the results of their own declaration and their own decisions regarding the imposition of tariffs. And now they are rethinking it.
The 90-day period is seen as time to negotiate, yet Europe remains ready if things take another turn for the worse.
The EU recently announced a 90-day pause to trade countermeasures targeting roughly 21 billion euros of US goods. This is to give Brussels and Washington the breathing room to negotiate a zero-for-zero tariff deal. But what happens if these dialogues hit deadlock? We're expecting all of the EU's former trade countermeasures to be back on the table.
Poland and other CEE countries remain prepared for more discussions, as tariffs would hamper growth and potentially inflict more damage.
We are open for talks, we are open for negotiations and for making a deal. And we are not for trade wars, because obviously trade wars are very costly to all parties, especially to our economies and to our businesses and also to our people.
While the higher tariff rates are temporarily paused, Erste Bank, one of the largest banks in the region, warns that if they resume, Central and Eastern European nations like Poland, the Czech Republic, and Hungary could see GDP growth dip by up to 0.3% in 2025 and 2026, potentially hindering economic progress. In an effort to shore up a united front on how to proceed, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk consulted with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on Thursday.
Defending our interests in a tough and decisive way, and at the same time protecting our transatlantic alliance against all odds, is our common goal. This was the conclusion of my today's talk with Ursula von der Leyen.
European markets bounced back on Thursday, offering a collective sigh of relief. However, with the threat of more tariffs looming, there's a growing urgency for a resolution. Whether a deal is struck or trade tensions escalate remains to be seen. Sasha Farbach, TVP World.
15 years ago, a Polish governmental plane crashed near Smolensk, Russia, killing all 96 people on board, including then-President Lech Kaczynski. The delegation was on its way to commemorate the victims of the Katyn massacre. Today, the Smolensk tragedy still divides the Polish political stage. Paweł Trzaskowski has this story.
This tune echoed across Poland today. The last post, played in memory of the 96 people who died on this day 15 years ago. Among them were members of the Polish delegation, including then-President Lech Kaczynski, who were en route to Smolensk in Russia.
To pay tribute with their own presence to the Polish officers murdered in Katyn.
The plane crashed while attempting to land, killing all passengers on board.
The whole of the government apparatus, the cross-party members, the military, armed forces, top brass, were all wiped out in one fell swoop.
On Thursday, politicians from across the political spectrum paid their respects on the 15th anniversary of the disaster. Calls for reconciliation and unity were also made.
The memory of the Smolensk disaster and its victims should no longer divide us. Rebuilding our community and mutual respect is possible and necessary, even if it remains very difficult. Let us try. This is the tribute to their memory and that they are waiting for. May they rest in peace.
The remembrance of the Smolensk disaster has become a highly divisive issue in Polish politics. Two official reports, one Polish and one Russian, pointed to poor weather conditions and pilot error as the main cause of the crash. However, a separate investigation launched by Law and Justice, the party of the late President Kaczynski, eventually concluded the crash was caused deliberately by the Russians.
The most problematic thing is that it all happened in Russia, and President Lech Kaczynski was really known to be a very vocal opponent of Vladimir Putin.
The debate over the Smolensk tragedy
is divided on party lines. Those who wish to believe the conspiratorial aspect of things, those who accept the findings of the investigations.
On Thursday, though, Poland remembered those who lost their lives in one of the worst tragedies in the country's modern history. Paweł Trzaskowski for TVP World.
Discussions on reducing the US military presence in Europe have prompted fears that NATO member states are unprepared for a potential conflict with Russia, which continues to modernize and expand its army. Our chief political correspondent, Aaron Damon, examines Poland's military preparedness.
As America gives Europe the shakes over security and defence, Poland is picking up the baton.
Poland is investing. Poland will have the largest artillery in NATO, full stop.
When?
Well, if those plans, which I've mentioned before, really happen, we may have it, by early 30s.
That's a leading Polish defence analyst speaking exclusively to TVP World on the record, emphasising the country is on track to build the continent's biggest army.
The equipment doesn't fight; people do fight. So we need to put more attention to expanding the armed forces themselves in terms of numbers, in terms of personnel. We need to train reserves because, if, God forbid, anything bad happens, your professional army goes first, but then it needs reinforcements from reserve force, and that should be in millions.
It comes as the US relocates its troops within Poland away from the military airfield in the eastern village of Jasionka, the main logistics hub for delivering Western weapons to Ukraine over the past 3 years. NBC also reports the Pentagon is considering withdrawing up to 10,000 troops from Eastern Europe altogether, though no final decisions have been made. At the same time, the US publicly lauded its relationship with Poland on a visit to a new army camp in the country's northwest on Thursday afternoon.
This is my first international trip. We wanted to come to Poland because the Polish people have been incredible partners. Later today, we're going to give out a community award to the Polish people, which we've never given out.
From the EU unlocking defence cash of more than 800 billion euros to the broader coalition of the willing, European governments have been coming to terms with America's new tack under President Donald Trump. On Friday, EU finance ministers will gather in Warsaw. The agenda: defence and security spending.
Poland plans to spend 4.7% of GDP this year, the most among NATO countries, among European Union countries. 5% is definitely the goal that we want to achieve next year. And even due to the multi-year contracts that we have signed, we have to maintain a high level of spending for years to come.
But not everything is smooth sailing.
The biggest difficulty is that right now, after the crisis in the Ukraine, everybody's looking for the weapon systems. And the capacity of the industry is very limited. Right now, all industry all over the world is trying to grow up. But nevertheless, especially the munition, this is something crucial. And everybody's looking for 155 millimeter munition. And the line for this munition is quite long.
On top of that, the money from Poland's defence contracts doesn't always stay in Europe, instead pouring into the likes of South Korea and indeed the United States. That's not unique to Poland, with the EU calculating over 70% of its defence procurement goes to non-EU suppliers. Europe and Poland aiming to beef up homegrown industry at a time of political volatility. Aaron Darman, TVP World.
Ministers of Defence from 30 countries in the so-called Coalition of the Willing have met today at NATO headquarters in Brussels to discuss the next steps for a peacekeeping mission and military aid to Ukraine. Our EU correspondent, Alex Kaczynski, has been following today's talks. Good evening, Alex. So what more can you tell us about the meeting? Has any major breakthrough been achieved?
Well, no major breakthroughs in this meeting. None were expected, frankly, but it's all about preparing for the unknown, preparing for what might happen in Ukraine after a peace deal is reached. This coalition of the willing preparing to support the Ukrainians in the air, at sea, and bolstering the Ukrainian forces. That's what John Healey, the UK Defence Secretary, said. However, those exact plans are still a bit of a mystery. So too is support from the United States. Let's start by having a listen to what the chair of this meeting, the UK Defence Secretary John Healey, had to say earlier today.
Our planning is real and substantial. Our plans are well developed, and we have clear objectives for Ukraine.
John Healey, they're talking about those substantial and well-developed plans, but not sharing them. I was at a briefing with the Defence Secretary just a few hours after he made that statement, and he was clear. One of the issues and one of the blockages to peace, as he sees it, is Vladimir Putin, who has no desire, in the perspective of the Defence Secretary of the UK, to make a concrete and lasting peace deal with Ukraine. Another big question mark looming over these meetings is what will the US support look like to this coalition of the willing? A lot of countries expressing nervousness about going at it alone, going without the United States. So clearly that will remain a big question, and still no clarity from Washington on that. Nevertheless, these preparations are continuing. That was the message from the chair of this meeting. They have to continue to prepare, even though the final objective is not yet clear.
That was Alex Kaczynski reporting from Brussels. Thank you very much, Alex. US and Russia have exchanged prisoners on the same day. Officials from the two countries held closed-door discussions in Istanbul, Turkey. And so we are now joined by our correspondent in Turkey, Kazimierz Wysiak. Good evening, Kazimierz. So what can you tell us about this latest exchange and the meeting?
Good evening, Maciej. Well, this meeting in Istanbul today has not been about Ukraine, as stated by the US State Department. Instead, the two sides have reportedly talked about the workings of the respective embassies in Washington and Moscow. Now, the State Department has also said that the two sides, quote, agreed to have a constructive dialogue, that it was a constructive approach following up on the meeting that was held previously also in Istanbul in February. There was also an interesting piece in that statement released by the US State Department saying that the US has reiterated its concern over Russia's ban on the US embassy employing local staff in Moscow. But the talks were also focusing on the cooperation when it comes to ensuring stable banking services for the two embassies. Whether these talks also included Ukraine, we don't really know. The US State Department has said no. Now, all of this also comes on the same day that the US and Russia have exchanged prisoners, like you've just said. Russia has reportedly released Ksenia Karelina, that's a US-Russian dual national, who has been sentenced to 12 years in prison for allegedly sending just over $50 to a Ukrainian charity. So this prisoner has been released by Russia, but when it comes to the US side has reportedly freed Artur Petrov, a German-Russian dual citizen who was accused of exporting some sensitive American microelectronics. So this is the latest round of talks between US and Russia, as we still don't have any ceasefire or peace in Ukraine. Back to you in the studio.
That was Kazimierz Wyszak reporting from Istanbul, Turkey. Thank you very much, Kazimierz. There are at least 155 Chinese nationals fighting in Russian ranks against Ukraine, claims President Volodymyr Zelensky. The news is prompting fears of the conflict, that the conflict could escalate further as more nationalities join the fighting. We're going now live to a Ukraine correspondent, Os Kaczynski. Good evening, Os. So what's the Beijing's response to Ukrainian claims?
Well, Beijing has asked President Zelensky to withhold, to rather not, to calm down their rhetoric from irresponsible remarks. That's what Beijing's response is. Whereas President Zelensky has accused Russia of systemic recruitment of Chinese citizens to fight in its war. Now, this comes off the back of Ukraine capturing 2 Chinese citizens in Donetsk who were fighting with the Russians. Now, the Ukrainians have since published a video interview with one of those prisoners of war. We've blurred the face of this individual, but let's take a listen to what he had to say in that video published by the Ukrainian government.
A Russian was in charge. He just told us what to do, and we followed his actions. Whatever he did, we did. We were hiding in a wooden shelter when a drone strike hit us. It damaged my weapon, an AK-47. At that moment, there were 2 of us, me and 1 Russian soldier. Here in Ukraine, I'm treated better than I was in Russia. The food is better, and I feel safer. I don't want to go back to Russia. I want to go back to China.
Now, President Zelensky said that Ukraine believes that such blatant involvement of Chinese citizens in hostilities on the territory of Ukraine during the war of aggression is a deliberate step towards the expansion of the war and is yet another indication that Moscow simply needs to drag out the fighting. So strong words coming from Kyiv in response to this latest development with Chinese citizens fighting alongside the Russian army.
That was Os Kaczynski reporting from Kyiv. Thank you very much, Os, and stay safe. A global investigation into a paedophile network has led to the arrest of nearly 170 individuals across Europe, with some 100 of them apprehended in Poland alone. The child predators may face up to 15 years in prison. Sonia Gatabyszczyn has this report.
Over 520,000 illegal files containing child exploitation material, more than 1,700 potential incriminating devices, as well as 3 unlicensed firearms. These were among the findings in a sweeping crackdown of an international child exploitation network, which had nearly 100 suspects detained in Poland.
The operation itself lasted multiple days across March and April, whereas the preparations began several weeks earlier. It was a collaboration with various agencies, British National Crime Agency and the American FBI, involving typical IT and analytical activities as well as exchange of operational information, all aimed at identifying and reaching the suspects.
The operation, codenamed Fever, also involved Europol and law enforcement across Europe. In total, 166 suspects were detained in cooperating countries. These individuals were involved in producing child sexual abuse content, managing online forums for its distribution, and even inciting minors to consider committing suicide.
In cases where the courts approved the prosecution's request for pre-trial detention, suspects remain in custody and are awaiting further trial. All of them have heard criminal charges and will be criminally liable. As for the amount of the punishment, in extreme cases, we're talking about up to 15 years in prison.
As part of the operation, Poland's Central Cybercrime Bureau, in cooperation with the German police, shut down one of the biggest pedophile streaming platforms. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Gatabishchan.
At 36, you might be entering the perfect age for a professional footballer. That is, if you're Polish and playing for FC Barcelona. Robert Lewandowski has once again proven he's in top form this season, scoring twice against his former team Borussia Dortmund on a thrilling Wednesday Champions League evening. Natalia Komarov has this report.
An amazing feat by Robert Lewandowski. The Polish striker scored 2 goals and provided 1 assist in yesterday's Champions League quarter-final, showing complete dominance over his old team, Borussia Dortmund.
It was an incredible quarter-final match in Champions League. Barcelona won 4-0 with Borussia Dortmund, and Lewandowski was the MVP of the match.
We defended very, very well today. But even with the ball, it was at a very, very high level. I was satisfied.
When Lewandowski left Germany for the sunny shores of Catalonia in 2022, many believed his best days were behind him. But at 36 years of age, Poland's most famous footballer might be having his best season yet.
So he scored his 104th and 105th Champions League goal ever, and he became the first player to score 10-plus goals for 3 different teams. So it just shows not only is he having a brilliant season, but he's just been incredibly consistent at the very highest level.
It's an incredible season for Lewandowski because everyone thought that it's the end of his career. 11 goals in this edition of Champions League and 99 goals in Barcelona. So, is this the chance for Golden Ball? Maybe, maybe.
The second leg of the quarter-final is to take place in Dortmund on April 15th. Here's hoping we'll get to witness Robert Lewandowski's 100th goal for FC Barcelona. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
Donald Trump's decision to pause the import tariffs announced only a few days ago has been met with much relief in Europe. But the escalating Washington-Beijing trade war may also have far-reaching consequences for the EU. Meanwhile, Kyiv seeks to stay on its pro-European path as it is about to enter rare earth minerals negotiations with the US. And to discuss it all, we're joined by Wojciech Przybylski, editor-in-chief of Visegrad Insight and president of the Respublika Foundation. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, Polish finance minister says the EU should not introduce any retaliatory measures against the US. This time, of course, after the announcement from we've heard from Washington. Now, our goal should not be escalation, but finding solutions that will be the best for the economy. That says Minister Andrzej Domański. Do you agree with him?
Yes, I agree. That seems to be a reasonable approach.
And so, what do you think Poland should do? What the EU should do if Donald Trump changes his mind tomorrow?
Well, then he'll change it that day after tomorrow. I mean, we are dealing with more of a chaotic hypocrisy in terms of his style of leadership. So we don't know what sort of decisions are consulted within his team. We've seen and heard his U.S. trade representative, Ambassador Green, in the Congress not being able to coherently respond to the questions from Congress representatives who were asking, what does he know about the strategy and negotiations? And it seemed like nobody knows that much in the team of Donald Trump. So what countries like Poland have to do is to analyze the long-term interests of the US overall and not take it at the face value of one particular leader, which is, of course, very important, an elected official, the seating president in the White House. But see the long-term strategy of the US, which overall has been very alike over several terms since Mr. Obama came into the White House, and over then to Donald Trump and Mr. Biden, and now back to Donald Trump. The policy is, as we have written in the Visegrad Inside editorial recently, is to back economic partnerships with force and to change the or reshape from globalism without limits to matching the economic trade alliances with security alliances. And this realignment has been ongoing and now just has been shifted to a higher gear.
So Donald Trump is predictable after all.
American foreign policy is predictable overall. Mr. Donald Trump doesn't seem to be very predictable, but he doesn't have as many moves as he probably would believe he could take. And the overall objective of the US foreign policy has not altered so significantly, even under his term. It only, as I said, was shifted to a higher gear. Some say that we should still wait for a year or year and a half to evaluate the effects of this, but we also have to take into account that some of the sanction policy on China, limiting the space of trade with those who are essentially positioning themselves as rivals, if not enemies, of the West, is going to take effect from Biden administration already. Also, after Mr. Biden left the administration, such as the smart sanctions on high-tech production in China and retaliations that China has already signaled before Mr. Trump came to office on the US with the limitations of the rare mineral exports. So this is an ongoing.
Which I'm really glad you've just mentioned. So tomorrow, the US and Ukraine will begin the negotiations on the so-called rare earth minerals deal. And Kyiv says that it will only sign it if it adheres to Ukraine's constitution and does not affect Ukraine's European integration. Do you expect some turbulence on the way, or rather they will sign it swiftly?
I think Ukraine is going to stay true to this course. I've been in Kiev on the 24th of February this year, hearing exactly that from the officials, whose strategy overall is to have a deal, to have agreement with Mr. Trump, in order also to give him more ammunition to persuade Congress, to persuade the American people that there is something to win for them and for their prosperity in Ukraine, so that they are committed to the support of Ukraine overall in the long term. But the strategic objective of Ukraine is to anchor itself not just in the EU, but in all the institutions of international economy and finance that require that this deal does not step over these boundaries and the rules of free trade.
I see. Now, today, the office of Ukraine's president stated that there can be no discussion regarding the size of Kiev's army. Now, officially, we've heard that American and Russian delegations met in Istanbul today to discuss slightly different affairs. But why do you think this statement appears today?
The statement
on the size of the Ukrainian army.
Well, if there were any speculations, if there were even public communication, as we know, Russia is having an ongoing strategic communication to undermine Ukrainian position, to put it in the in the public of the Western democracies, within such conspiracy theories sometimes of what could be the outcome of such negotiations or talks, that Ukraine has to react, has to be proactive actually. It doesn't have to react only, but it has to be proactive and demonstrate its assertive position. It's crystal clear. It's not just in the interest of Ukraine. It is in our clear interest in Europe overall to have Ukraine army strong, resilient, and well equipped with the support of the West to stand off, to stand ground onto this standoff with Russia.
And lastly, briefly, how close is Donald Trump to imposing new tariffs on Russia?
Well, I don't know, but a very interesting thing has happened since he imposed tariffs, and this is not the effect of tariffs alone. The prices of oil have dropped significantly. and they are continuing to drop, also because of the cartel decision, OPEC decision, to release more oil to the markets, which hits Russia considerably, and it is much more painful than any tariffs or sanctions, because Russia doesn't trade with US that much in order to feel any effect of that kind of sanctions. I'm not saying Donald Trump making is here, that his finger is on it, but the objective overall, as we would imagine, is to limit Russia's ability to wage the war, and it's happening right now.
Wojciech Przybylski, editor-in-chief of Visegrad Insight and president of the Res Publica Foundation, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much. And thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more here on TVP World.